Imagine you're asleep in a tent. Outside, the temperature is so cold that a person can freeze to death in a matter of hours. The nearest town is miles away. There are no roads, no lights, no help, just endless darkness. Then suddenly, something happens. Something so terrifying that you don't stop to put on your boots. You don't grab your coat. You don't even use the tent entrance. Instead, you take a knife and slash your way out. Within minutes, you and your friends are running into the frozen wilderness. And by sunrise, every one of you is dead. This sounds like the plot of a horror movie. But it isn't. It really happened. In 1959, a group of experienced hikers set out into the remote mountains of Soviet Russia. They were young, healthy, skilled, and fully prepared for the journey ahead. They carried maps, food, survival equipment, and years of experience. Nothing about this expedition suggested danger. In fact, the photographs they left behind show smiling faces, friends joking with each other, people excited about the adventure ahead. Yet within days, every member of the expedition would be dead. And what investigators discovered at their campsite would become one of the most baffling mysteries in modern history. January 1959. Deep inside the Soviet Union, 10 young hikers prepared for what was supposed to be an ordinary expedition. The leader of the group was a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He was experienced, organized, and respected by everyone in the team. The hikers weren't thrill-seekers looking for trouble. They were skilled adventurers pursuing one of the highest hiking certifications available in the Soviet Union. Difficult? Yes. Dangerous? Certainly. But impossible? Not at all. Similar expeditions had been completed before, and the group felt confident. As the expedition progressed, something unexpected happened. One member of the group began experiencing severe pain and illness. His name was Yuri Yudin. Eventually, he made a difficult decision. He would turn back. At the time, it felt like a crushing disappointment. Everyone else would continue without him. He shook hands with his friends, said goodbye, and began the journey home. Nobody knew it then, but Yuri had just become the only survivor of the entire expedition. The remaining 9 hikers pressed onward, deeper into the mountains, deeper into isolation. As the days passed, the hikers kept taking photographs. Looking at them today is unsettling. Not because they show fear, but because they don't. The group laughs, jokes with each other, marches confidently through the snow. Everything seems normal. Yet every photo captures people unknowingly moving toward their final night. And then, without warning, the photographs end. No goodbye, no distress call, no explanation, just silence. At first, nobody panicked. Delays were common in winter expeditions. Snowstorms could slow travel for days. Friends and family assumed the hikers would eventually return. But then days became weeks, and the silence continued. No letters, no radio communication, no sign of the group. Concern quickly turned into fear. Search teams were assembled. Experienced rescuers headed into the mountains. They expected to find stranded hikers. Perhaps an accident. Maybe a weather-related delay. What they didn't expect was to stumble upon a mystery. One that would leave even seasoned investigators confused. After days of searching through snow-covered wilderness, they finally found the campsite. And the moment they saw it, they knew something was terribly wrong. The tent stood partially buried beneath the snow, lonely, silent, empty, There were no bodies nearby, yet the scene felt wrong. Very wrong. Inside the tent were the hikers' belongings: food, equipment, winter clothing, boots. Everything appeared to have been left behind in a hurry. Then investigators noticed something that immediately changed the entire case. The tent had been cut open, not from the outside, from the inside. Let that sink in. 9 experienced hikers were sheltering inside this tent during one of the coldest nights imaginable. And for some reason, they decided that staying inside was more dangerous than escaping into the darkness. But why? What happened inside that tent? What could possibly frighten trained hikers so badly that they abandoned their shelter, their boots, and their best chance of survival? The footprints leading away from the campsite were about to make the mystery even stranger. Investigators followed the footprints leading away from the tent. What they found made no sense. Many of the hikers appeared to have left without proper footwear. Some wore only socks. Some may have been barefoot. Yet the tracks continued for nearly a mile through the freezing wilderness. Why would experienced hikers abandon their shelter in such deadly conditions? The answer wasn't waiting at the tent. It was waiting in the forest. At the edge of a forest, investigators discovered the first 2 bodies beneath a large cedar tree. Nearby were the remains of a small fire. It looked as though they had desperately tried to survive. Then, between the tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found, including expedition leader Igor Dyatlov. Their position suggested they had attempted to return to camp, but they never made it. At this point, investigators believed the mystery was simple. The hikers had fled the tent, become lost in the darkness, and frozen to death. Then spring arrived, and everything changed. Months later, as the snow began to melt, search teams uncovered the remaining 4 hikers, hidden beneath deep snow in a nearby ravine. What they discovered shocked everyone. These victims hadn't simply frozen to death. One had a fractured skull, another suffered devastating chest injuries. The force was compared to a serious car accident. Yet there were almost no external wounds, no signs of a fight, no evidence of an attack. And one victim was missing her tongue. Suddenly, this was no longer a tragic accident. It was a mystery. But through all the decades, one question has remained at the center of the mystery. Forget the injuries. Forget the rumors. Ask yourself this: what happened inside that tent? Because before any injuries occurred, before anyone died, 9 experienced hikers made a decision that ultimately sealed their fate. They cut their way out of their own shelter, left their survival gear behind, and stepped into a freezing wilderness. Why? What could possibly have frightened them enough to do that? And perhaps more importantly, what did they believe would happen if they stayed?